effort to fix the confusing new traffic and bike lanes in Mira Mesa. Take a look at them on your screen here.
The road on Gold Coast Drive now has only a narrow lane, just one, for both directions of traffic.
Yeah, neighbors have expressed their safety concerns. Now the city is taking action.
Councilmember Chris Cate represents the area and says he's just as confused as the people who live here.
The other question and the other thing that we heard so much from people who lived in areas where this was going in is simply, how did we get here? How is it that we had these type of lanes put in without any type of education?
So this was the Mira Mesa bike lane project of 2022. And as you probably gathered from all the news coverage, the project was a complete disaster. But how is that? How is it that the city of San Diego decided to go ahead with such a ridiculous project to the point where this project became one of the most ridiculous bike lane projects of all time on the internet? The real foundational reason behind all of these kinds of projects is that little rectangular sign we always see in North America when we drive, that white rectangular sign that says 25 miles per hour. And it's such a challenge because, like most over-designed roads in Southern California in the suburbs, the roads are very wide, they're very over-designed, and people will drive way too fast on them and also way too frequently. And that's a real problem because the suburbs, as the name suggests, have a lot of people living and playing there. And whenever you combine high car speeds and residential areas, you unfortunately get the very unsurprising result of high traffic fatalities. And because San Diego, like many American cities, is a Vision Zero city, this is not a sustainable status quo. So the mission is to try to change the current situation. So to tackle the speeding problem, the city rolled out a new striping scheme. And this striping scheme removed the center line of the driving area and it narrowed the driving width. So in this setup, you might have two cars approach one another. And because it's not wide enough, the cars are supposed to go slower since it's not as comfortable. And when the two cars approach one another, if the bike lanes on either side are empty, both cars can merge into the bike lane to pass each other safely. However, if there's a biker in the bike lane, the driver driving in the same direction as the biker is supposed to yield behind the biker, allow the oncoming car to pass them, and then they can take over the whole driving lane and then pass the cyclist. In theory, the idea might sound reasonable, but in reality, very little in the road environment has actually changed. The road width is still very, very wide. It's still very easy to merge into the parking lanes at high car speeds. And all we've done is used cyclists as a traffic calming measure. So we're using the cyclists themselves to try to get the cars to slow down. So we just hope that the drivers notice the cyclists and know how to behave properly. If you're staring at this design and yelling, "Where on earth did you get such a ridiculous idea from, San Diego?" I'm actually going to try to guess. I'm going to guess that they probably got the idea from a street like Lange Nieuwstraat in the town of Schiedam in the Netherlands. Lange Nieuwstraat is what the Dutch would classify as a non-ideal access street. It's an access street because it connects one of the main arterial roads going through Schiedam, and it connects it with the center of Schiedam. However, it's also classified as non-ideal because Lange Nieuwstraat has suboptimal widths, suboptimal traffic intensities, and it also is host to a pretty busy bus route, which adds some particularly challenging design elements. So in the Netherlands, they often say that they have an ideal design and then a non-ideal design. So the non-ideal design is always going to have compromises they have to make it work in the context of the location. So Lange Nieuwstraat is a Dutch ETW inside of the built-up area. And all Dutch ETWs inside of the built-up area have a default speed limit of 30 kilometers an hour. And because Lange Nieuwstraat is non-ideal in its context and its overall design, there are some compensatory things we have to do to make the desired behavior happen. So there's no center line in the street because Dutch ETW designs prohibits that, since it's a shared space where cars, cyclists, and mopeds can intermingle freely and safely. So to allow that safe mingling to happen, one of the first things they do is they try to narrow the driving width to get cars to slow down. And they narrow it by adding suggestion lanes on either side of the street. And the suggestion lanes are these dashed lines, often with red asphalt, just meant to narrow the surface. They don't operate like official bike lanes. So bicyclists may still ride down the center of the street. They are not required to ride on the suggestion lanes unless there is a bicycle symbol on it. Then it serves as an official bike lane. The car parking is also made up of a completely different material, and the car parking isn't just a continuously striped area of the road. So it's broken up by curb cuts, and it just causes the entire street to feel a lot narrower than its counterpart on Gold Coast Drive. We also notice that Lunga is quite straight, which can cause fast car driver behavior. So they've also added what we call splitter islands, where only one car can get through at a time, and then one car will have to yield to let another car through. And there's special signage on the street telling the drivers which car has the right of way. Well, that sounds great, you might think. How does Lunga operate? And the truth is, guys, not that well at all, because cars still go way too fast here, and cyclists don't feel comfortable enough to ride in the center of the street. Instead, they keep to the suggestion lanes, making them operate like bike lanes in all but name. In fact, it's such a problem that some of the neighbors have been putting up impromptu 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit signs, kind of as a begging gesture to get car drivers to slow down. The street definitely has a reputation in Schiedam as being problematic, and the city is considering solutions to fix it. So if Lunga operates so poorly, why on earth would a city like San Diego try to copy it in the first place? And this is really the crux of why I find the Mira Mesa bike lane project so interesting, because it reveals so much about the current state of the transportation industry in North America. A more progressive engineer or planner could come to the Netherlands and see a street like Lunga and then end up completely misunderstanding it, because what they end up seeing is just a regular street with some bike lanes along either side, and they kind of try to copy that. Whereas what they're really looking at is an ETW street where they try to do everything possible to make the center of the street safe for everybody, and then they don't realize that mission failed. And then with their misinterpretation, they come up with something that is the worst of all worlds. So there's no center line, so cars drive too fast. The cyclists end up being some kind of sacrificial traffic calming measure, and then cars are still merging and diverging very quickly across the cycle lane. And then the neighborhood, of course, with no notification, reacts extremely hostily to projects like this, and then give any kind of future street improvement projects a bad name due to an experience like this. And kind of the messed up thing about this is that ultimately in the professional circles, the public ends up getting the blame, because the engineers will say, well, we tried to do something progressive, but the community just wasn't ready for it. Those simple-minded people ruined our plans. When in reality, it's the engineers and planners who weren't educated enough to realize that they completely misunderstood the concept and the purpose of places like Lunga, and they also weren't even aware that they were copying from some very poor examples.